go ahead and start the recording. And now I will try to bring the agenda up. There, can you see that? All right, well, the first item on the agenda is the appointment of co-chairs. Last meeting, there was some discussion about appointing two chairs. And so with that, I don't know if somebody would like to make a nomination, or I'll leave that open to the working group to determine who the co-chairs are going to be.
This is Kate McBride. I think we had potentially a couple people that had showed some interest. And so I'm going to nominate Mike Fox to be chair. I don't know if we need to do these separately, but I'd like to nominate Mike Fox to be the chair of the Bi-State Working Group.
Great. Is there a second?
Jake Anderson will second that.
All right. There's been a first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of appointing Commissioner Fox as chair, vote aye.
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 All right. Any nays? I didn't hear any. All right, Mike, I think you've got the gavel.
Okay, for co-chair, there was some talk last time about Commissioner Jacob being the co-chair. Would there be anybody else would like to be the co-chair? And if not, could I have a motion that Commissioner Jacob Anderson be co-chair?
I'll make
So
a
moved.
motion that Jacob Anderson from Clickstack County be the co-chair.
Okay,
I'll second.
Oh. Train's coming. Okay, so we have a nomination and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, congratulations. We got a chair and a co-chair now. Let's go ahead and move down through the agenda. Item number 3, legislative goals presentation. Kevin, can you lead that or introduce?
Absolutely. So just an introduction of sorts. In your packet, there were 4 documents. There was a summary graphic document that showed in graphic format the legislative goals for the next handful of sessions and approaches for accomplishing those goals by each of our government affairs specialists. And I also included in the packet a more detail from each of their perspectives on the approach for meeting these goals. And so we have in attendance this afternoon, we've got Dan Bates and Miles Pingally from Thorn Run. We'll start off. We'll have Brad Boswell eventually joining us, and Jessica from his office. And then Hal Heemstra from Summit Strategies will complete the review from the DC perspective. And I think what I'll do for the time being is stop the share here. And I'd like to bring up the infographic that Genevieve Scholl produced. Let's see. All right, do you see that infographic?
Yep.
All right, so in summary, just to kind of get things started off, we met with our 3 legislative government affairs consultants and really talked about what they felt what were going to be the main goals and achievable goals over the next 1 to 5 years as we come up through the 25 session. And as you know, we did have some great accomplishments this last session with $5 million from both Oregon and Washington, and of course the build grant from the federal perspective. And there's also the Bi-State Bridge Authority, which is the primary policy goal that we're going to be looking at for the 22 session. And we've initially, for the sake of this discussion, on the Oregon side, put up a starting goal of 75 million for the project. On the Washington side, 100 million for the project. And then on the federal side, there'd be a number of grants and then the ultimate TIFIA loan that would, in essence, complete the funding for the bridge replacement. And the way that we thought we might start through this discussion is each individual would just kind of walk through what they see as being the opportunities and challenges, not just in the next session, but really for the project overall, and then just walk through each session in a summary. We don't want to read the larger reports that were distributed because we want to get into a Q&A. So we're going to ask each of our consultants to summarize what they have on this chart in about 5-10 minutes. If there's some clarifying questions by the working group, please jump in. But then I really want to try to sum this up in about 15 minutes, and then we can have 15-20 minutes for a more robust discussion. So if that sounds like a decent approach, Dan, are you on the line?
I am.
Why don't you go ahead and start off the Oregon perspective for the project?
Great. I'll give some overview comments and then actually kick it to Miles, over to Miles to do the session by session quick overview. In short, our belief is that with $75 million it's both a needed and a significant investment. It would be by and large magnitudes larger than any other off ODOT system investment. It is clearly a state needs to be a state priority, and we think it's an appropriate ask, but difficult given the magnitude of where the state's historically made investments, and we think we have a great case to make, and we'll do that. That kind of funding is almost certainly going to have to be associated with a transportation package, and so we are working with the larger group of folks pushing a transportation package. We think that it is unlikely that package will pass in 2023, that it is more likely to pass in something like 2025. That being said, we think the time is ripe to be talking about the magnitude of the ask, even in this short session, as we really lean into the authorizing language for the Bi-State Bridge Authority. And so in the midst of the near-term goal in 2022 of passing that bill, we will also begin the ask on the 75 million, which we think is almost certainly going to be associated with a transportation package investment in Oregon. And that 75 million, while the right number for the ask, is magnitudes larger than an off-system investment, worthwhile, but we're going to need your all's help as we lobby folks to do that work. I can kick it over to Miles in the next couple of minutes to just walk through the session by session framework.
Thanks, Dan. So, as Dan said, that $75 million investment is going to need to be part of a transportation package. Transportation package is not going to move in the 2022 short session. It's just coming up too quick, and there's obviously a lot of stakeholder engagement and work that needs to go to moving a package like that. Not something that can be done in the short session. However, there may be some spending in the short session. Typically, short sessions are not focused on budgets, but the American Rescue Plan Act and funds that have come in from the federal government may change that. The spending will be in smaller millions, not in the big millions on the scale we're talking about for this project. And there may be a certain color of money attached to those investments that would prevent the bridge from being a qualified investment. But as Dan said, we're not going to waste any time in engaging legislators and stakeholders about this $75 million needed investment and the reasons for it and the urgency for it. We would certainly like to be able to deploy you all as members of the bi-state working group and elected officials in meetings with state transportation leaders during and perhaps even before the 2022 legislative session to help communicate the importance and urgency of this project and make sure that legislators have a good understanding of just how important this project and the timing of completing this project is to the Gorge community in both states. And so we hope that you're willing to help provide that role. We'll of course be assisting you in advocacy with the legislature, developing briefing materials, making sure that we're coordinated in key messages and talking points, and arranging meetings and helping you prepare for those meetings. And the goal is to get started right away on developing a clear and consistent message that elected officials are hearing from multiple messengers, from us, from the bi-state working group, from the Hood River legislative delegation, from members of the community. And so I think that will position us well as we are diligently monitoring potential funding opportunities in 2022 to aggressively pursue any funding opportunities that do emerge to go after a number that's going to be smaller than 75 million, but still keeping that larger $75 million ask in the picture and in front of legislators. The other main thing that we're going to be working on in the 2022 session, and really the main focus for the 2022 session, is of course going to be passing the Bi-State Bridge Commission legislation. And that will provide, having that legislation, it will provide a good venue to talk to legislators about the project at large. And we hope that you all will be able to participate in that advocacy effort to pass that Bi-State Bridge Commission legislation in the 2022 session. So moving on to 2023, there is a chance that if the Bi-State Bridge Authority legislation doesn't pass in the short session, that we will need to make sure that we pass that bill and move it in the 2023 session. But really our focus here is going to be going after that $75 million ask. And as Dan said, our chance to secure funding of that magnitude for the bridge project is going to be as part of a transportation package. We think that, to be realistic, that the odds that there is going to be a major transportation package moved in 2023 are relatively low. Conversations around a new transportation package haven't really even started yet in Oregon. And it's usually a multi-year, multi-session process to arrive at a package that can obtain popular support in the legislature. And the enthusiasm for the package needed to raise taxes to fund the package. But certainly we are going to continue to meet with legislators and advocate for the $75 million. And we'll also be working with other transportation stakeholders to help build momentum for that package and ensure that if a package does materialize in 2023, that we are well positioned to pursue substantial funding for the bridge as part of that package. And if a package does not materialize in the 2023 session, our sort of secondary goal is instead to pursue $5 to $10 million for the bridge via lottery funding or via discretionary funding from ODOT. And the thinking there is, there's obviously urgent need to move forward with this project. There are costs and ongoing engineering and design costs that need funding, and any money that we are able to pick up for the project and allow the bi-state working group and the port to continue work on the bridge as we continue to pursue that $75 million ask is going to be helpful and worthwhile, and will also give us the opportunity to keep the funding, larger funding need for the project in front of legislators and keep the Hood River Bridge as part of the transportation conversation. So, certainly we again will hope to enlist you as a key part of the lobby strategy to pursue funding in 2023, as well as working to mobilize community members and local businesses to demonstrate the level of support and the urgency for this project. And then, assuming that a transportation package does not pass in 2023, we think it is significantly more likely that there's a transportation package in the 2025 session. So we will continue, if the package does not come until 2025, we will continue our advocacy for that 75 million during the interim and the lead up till the 2025 session, and aggressively pursue the $75 million allocation to the bridge as part of that transportation package in 2025. Again, a $75 million ask is orders of magnitude higher than other non-ODOT transportation investments that we see, but we know that that's the need for the project, and that's a justifiable need. And we think we have a strong case to make with legislators that this is an important investment for the state to make. So I think that's it for in terms of a high level look at our strategy between now through 2025. Happy to take questions, or if we want to wait until the other consultants go, we can do that as well.
All right. Any clarifying questions for either Dan or Miles? Commissioner Benton, there you go.
Thanks. Thanks, Dan and Miles. The question I have, you both alluded to this ask being significantly more. Can you give me than other asks for, like, I think you referred to them as off-system projects. Can you give me an idea of how much larger this is and what a typical funding request for an off-system project would look like?
I think, in looking back at the last transportation package, I think the largest single project investments that we saw, and again, we're not talking about something like the Rose Quarter project or I-205 that are major ODOT transportation system investments, but for other local government infrastructure investments, I think was in the neighborhood of about 30 million were the largest allocations that we saw in the 2017 transportation package.
Okay, thanks.
So was 2017 the last time that there was any funding that came through of that sort, 2017?
Yeah, that was the last time that a statewide transportation package was passed.
Okay.
Hey, Miles or Dan, how frequently is there a cycle for these transportation plans, and what has the cycle tended to be in the past, if there is such a thing?
Historically, it's been 6 to 8 years before the first one fails, and then typically the session that follows it will pass. So somewhere in the range of 6 to 10 years has been the historic cycle.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Brad, I don't believe is with us yet. Jessica, are you with us, Jessica?
I am, yes.
Are you prepared to give a summary in Brad's absence?
I can give the highest level summary, but please keep in mind I've only been on the team for a couple months. So I would say if you have questions, I know he'll be on in about 10 minutes. Maybe hold them for him, or I can write them down and ask him and follow up. But I do know that in the 2022 session, similar to Oregon, we don't anticipate a transportation package to go through this year. We do expect it to be about 1 to 3 years out. However, we have heard whispers of a special session regarding the transportation package this upcoming November. So more to come there. But really in the short session, what we're really trying to do is connect with key legislators who are either in the transportation committee or in the regionally impacted areas and meet with them and kind of explain a little bit about what are we doing? Why is this important? How does this impact the constituents? Why do we need a large $100 million of that transportation package? And really just kind of start the basic foundation framework. And then from there, going into the 2023 session, once everything has been passed in relation to the transportation bill, really starting to advocate for why we need the $100 million. So again, I know it's a very high level overview. Yeah, Kevin, sorry about that.
That's fine. That's fine. I know we'll move over to Hal since he's here, and then maybe Brad can come in a couple of minutes and kind of pick up the baton. But welcome, Jessica, and I'm looking forward to working with you on this project. So Hal, there you are.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone. Nice to be with you today. It's always a pleasure to talk about my favorite bridge project and where we're going to get $400 million, which is a pretty big nut to crack. But it's been a really good team effort over the last couple of months where the state advocates and the state lobbyists, as well as the federal advocates and federal lobbyists, have been holding team sessions actually at the direction of Michael McElway and Kevin, and really putting our heads together to come up with a more comprehensive strategy. And I think it makes a lot of sense. So where are we at the federal level? As I'm sure many of you have been reading and listening on the radio and reading in the press, there are two big efforts going on in Washington right now, both a little bit stalled, but ultimately I think they will both pass. One is the Infrastructure Investment Act, which has multiple names. Sometimes it's referred to as the BIF, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Financing Act. Sometimes it's called the BIB, B-I-B, and sometimes it's called the IIJA. But for today's purposes, let's just call it the infrastructure bill. And so the infrastructure bill is the $550 billion in new funding. That's a bipartisan bill that was passed in the Senate in August and sent over to the House. And it is expected to pass the House. There were attempts to pass it last week, but those ultimately were pulled back. And that's because there are members of the Progressive and Liberal caucus on the Democratic side who are kind of holding the infrastructure bill hostage over the ultimate structure and price that's going to be included in what is called the reconciliation bill. And the reconciliation bill is a bill that will get passed by Democrat votes only. And so they don't have to be very bipartisan in the way that they're putting that bill together, and they haven't been. But what they are having a trouble doing is bringing the Democrat caucus all together on one particular vision. And so the House really wanted a $3.5 trillion bill. There are more conservative members of the Democratic caucus in the Senate who have said that's too much, and they want it to be closer to 1.5. Senator Manchin from West Virginia and Senator Sinema from Arizona. And so right now they're really struggling to try to figure out how they cut 3.5 trillion down to somewhere between 1.5 and probably $2 trillion. Once they figure that out, I think the reconciliation bill will move through the House and then through the Senate. And I expect that to be closer to the end of the year than in the next few weeks. Where when that package moves, so will the infrastructure package. And the infrastructure package does have a lot of new opportunity for funding. It has a lot of new funding with $550 billion in new investment beyond anything that the federal government has ever invested in transportation. It's not only transportation, it has broadband, it has some aviation, it has other elements to it, it has some housing elements, but mostly it's hard infrastructure for transportation. Now on the transportation side, there is a new bridge program, which is great. It's a $3.265 billion program, and it establishes a whole new competitive grant process for bridges. And they can be state bridges, they can be off-system bridges, they can be federal bridges, they can be local bridges, tribal bridges. There are two different kinds of grants that they're going to give. One is for big projects. The minimum grant size is going to be $50 million. So that fits into our overall federal goal of a $50 million grant. Could come out of this new bridge program. There is a caveat with the new bridge program, though, that the grant should be of sufficient size to enable the project to proceed to completion. And I think that that is going to be a bit of a hang up on all the federal grant funding. They'll want to be kind of the last dollar in, not the first dollars in. So when we're looking at $50 million in federal funding for the bridge, but we're looking at a slower rollout at the state level at say 23, 24, 2025, it makes it difficult to be the last dollar in when those state contributions and state commitments are still kind of out there in the out years. So that will be a bit of a challenge as we go for funding for the bridge in 2022 or 2023 or 2024. But there will be grant cycles in all of those years. With the new bridge program, there will be grant cycles in those years with the infra program, which is getting an additional $8 billion out of the infrastructure bill. There will be new grant cycles in each of those years for what was formerly called the BUILD program. Now it's called the RAISE program under the Biden administration. And that program has been significantly plussed up as well. So there will be grant opportunities, but the big grants, the infra grants and the new bridge grants, those will be grants where they want the project to be pretty close to construction. And we're a ways away from that. So we may have to start a little smaller and focus on another RAISE grant or another BUILD grant, if you will, over the next couple of years to keep the project going on the design and engineering, those kinds of things, and then come in with a bigger federal grant ask towards the period when the state activity is a little more robust. And in the meantime, we'll be continuing to meet with all of the federal delegation. You all have seen the new congressional district maps, I'm sure, for Oregon. So as of as of 2023, your new congressional representative will be Earl Blumenauer, and Representative Bentz will no longer be representing Hood River. We have been meeting with Representative Blumenauer for the last decade on this bridge project, talking about the bridge. So it's not a new project for him, but it will be a bit of a challenge because he also represents the I-205 project, which Miles just mentioned. He also represents the Rose Quarter, which Miles just mentioned, and he also represents the new Interstate Bridge Replacement Project, the IBR. And so those are all really big projects in his congressional district. And as large as this one is, it's actually the smallest of all of those. And so he'll be torn in a lot of different directions or pulled in a lot of different directions. And it will be up to us to help convince him that this is a more manageable project and one that actually can get done in a timely fashion. Between now and when Congressman Bentz finishes representing Hood River, we'll probably be in one more grant cycle, a raise grant cycle this spring. And we'll be having conversations with the USDOT officials on whether or not it makes sense to go ahead and submit a request this year. We certainly could. We know that they like the project because it's already received build funding. But on the other hand, they could send a very clear signal that says we want to spread the around a little bit more, and you have to have another couple of years off before we'll give you another serious consideration for the next build, or now called raise grant. But we'll be having those conversations. We'll be meeting with the congressional delegations, both on the Washington side and the Oregon side. Representative Herrera Butler has been supportive of this project all the way through. She actually submitted an appropriations funding request and an Invest Act funding request for the bridge. It didn't get funded, but she did submit. And unfortunately, Representative Bentz chose not to submit any requests for any earmarked projects anywhere in his district. So we were at a bit of a disadvantage on the Oregon side, but Representative Herrera Butler did submit. But I think because only one of the representatives out of the two representing the project, it didn't get funded. There are no earmarks at all in the infrastructure investment bill that's going through Congress now. There had been hope that there would be significant earmarks in that project, in that bill, but Congress just chose not to. So right now we're focused more on the grant, cycles, and keeping everyone in the congressional delegation up to speed so that they can be advocates once those grant applications go in. I think that's probably enough for now. I'm happy to answer questions as we go on.
Mike, you're on mute. Commissioner Fox.
Okay. Hey, let me try and put this into perspective, from my point of view. We're in the process of getting an estimate updated, and so we really know how much money we're talking about, what we need for this bridge. It's highly likely it's going to be in the $450 million range. That includes taking down the old bridge. When I look at this chart here, I see about 225 million is all I see here. Has anybody asked you to help us find the other 100 million?
Well, I think the other 100 million, from my understanding, is that would come from tolling revenue. So that's not actually outlined in these, in each of these columns, but I think that's where the delta would come from. And as each of these individual efforts at the state level and at the federal level kind of ebb and flow, and maybe they'll be more successful than we anticipate, that will keep the toll need down. But if they're a little less successful than we anticipate, that would probably drive the toll up.
So, Michael, is that the plan?
But I would say that
I'm asking Michael. Where's Michael?
I think he's on mute there.
Oh, God.
All right, Michael, I think we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm fumbling here. Yeah, the rough cut is exactly the way Hal described. There's two tranches of toll-backed debt. The first would be a revenue bond. Let's just call that 100 million. And the second would be likely a TIFIA loan, also 100 million. Both tranches of debt would be backed by toll revenue. So Hal described it perfectly. If there's more grant money that's received, the toll backed debt will go down and the toll rate will go down, and vice versa.
So if we need that 100 million plus, what's the lead time to be able to get that in place?
Well, each has a different trajectory, of course, but the assumption has been, the working assumption has been the Bi-State Bridge Authority. Once that's approved, then the Bi-State Bridge Authority is essentially propped up or created, has its own executive director, its own staff, and then that entity would have to prepare to be underwritten, both for the revenue bonds and any TIFIA loan.
No, I understand that, but based on your experience, how long would that take?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of experience with creating a new government, single purpose government. So I'm not
Okay,
sure.
let me
I'd say
interrupt.
about 2 years or so.
Let me interrupt. It's not building that new organization from the, if you had to go out and get the bonds and the funding today under the port, the existing port, how long would it take?
Boy, I would say a year to a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think that that's probably a pretty good estimation of the length of time it takes to work through the TIFIA process as well. Just to go ahead and apply for a TIFIA loan, you've got to put up $250,000 in kind of earnest money, essentially, to work through the process with the feds. And so it is not inexpensive to start the process. And then you have to prove that it can be underwritten and you have a financial mechanism to pay it back. And one of the challenges with the TIFIA loan, TIFIA loans could be significantly more than $100 million, but they'll look at how the revenue is projected to pay back the loan, because it is a loan. It's a long lead time. Steve Siegel's on the line, I think, but as I recall, TIFIA loans they don't have to start being paid back until the project is completed. So you don't have carrying costs. But once you do complete the project, I believe it's 40 years that you've got to pay back. It might be 30. So it's a pretty long payback period, but they really want to know what your revenue source is going to be before the feds are going to give you a loan.
Right. Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. So if you take a look what we're trying to drive to right now, we're trying to get a management contract in place by the end of the calendar year. What that allows us to do is to have a bunch of arms and legs of people that are very experienced in building bridges to get them in place. So we have some, as I say, arms and legs to help us get moving on this project. That'll be by the end of the year. And we believe we have money that's either in the pipeline right now, the $5 million, or partly is already here to help us fund that for the next several years. We're not talking a large organization, but we are talking about very experienced people. And it would cover things like project management, contracting, regulatory support, communications, those kinds of folks, permitting and whatnot. One of the first things that we want to do with that organization early next year is to get the design contract awarded, which means they've got to write the RFP. We've got to go through that whole process, and it's not a quick process if you're going to do it right. We plan on using the approach that we'll have a staged approach to design. I don't like doing it that way, but we're kind of stuck that way because we don't have enough funds. So we need to find And we've probably got enough to get us started, but it won't go very far. The idea would be to have something in the neighborhood of 30 to $40 million to get us totally through design. And that will probably take about 3 years to get the design done. So if we start that process, if we award and they start it June of 22, it'd be 23, 24, June of 25, we'd be nearing completion on design. And a little bit prior to that, we would want to go out for construction. So we need that next tranche of money in 25, late 25, to go ahead and do construction. And that's a 3-year for the first bridge, the new bridge. And depending on who you believe, at least a couple years to tear the old bridge down. That's where we're going to need the big money, but we need to try and find about $30 million by mid next year to allow us to award an engineering contract all the way to completion. The way we're going to have to do it, if we tell contractors you can go for, part of a year and you're going to have to stop, and then maybe hopefully we got some more money and then you're going to stop, and then you get a little bit more money and stop. The cost of that is going to be very high. Can we do it? Yeah. It's nowhere near the most efficient way of doing things.
Right.
So what I'm really asking you guys for is, how can we get creative, and what do you need from us and the public to put necessary support out there that we got to find this $30 million in relatively short order for design?
It's a really great question. And I think, one target should be, several targets at the federal level should be these new infrastructure funds that will likely be passed by Congress by the end of this year. And so there will be new grant programs stood up next year or expanded under the BUILD, or now called RAISE, and infra programs. Infra wouldn't be a good target though, because infra is for really big construction. So BUILD, RAISE has a $25 million cap, and it's going to have probably, I think it's getting plussed up by about $3 billion. So that will fund a lot of new RAISE grant applications. And, we can certainly go back and look there. Another source at the federal level would be USDA, Rural Development Funds. We've actually had some pretty encouraging meetings with USDA Rural Development folks over the years when Michael's been back and when other commissioners have been back. We've had pretty positive meetings because just because of the physical location of this bridge, it's in rural America, and they're always looking for good projects in rural America to use their rural development funds on. And going for $100 million is not something that USDA could manage, but going for 10 million, that might be something that they would be more willing to consider. Certainly worth pursuing that. And then my other suggestion, and it'd be interesting to hear what the state lobbyists have to say about this, and I think there are representatives from WashDOT and ODOT on the phone as well. If this infrastructure bill passes, and I think it will by Christmas, the state DOTs are going to have a lot more discretionary money because there's a lot of money in the infrastructure bill that will get distributed by formula. So Oregon DOT and WashDOT will both end up with more discretionary capacity than they have now. Now, how they choose to spend that money is, I don't work the state level. So that's something you all will have to to work with ODOT and in Oregon's case, the Oregon Transportation Commission. There is discretionary money that comes from the feds that's distributed to the states by formula, and it is not earmarked for anything. So how that money gets spent is another question. And if you're looking, if the need, say, is $30 million, my suggestion would be, is it a reasonable scenario where we'd say Oregon DOT, out of your new discretionary money, you need to come up with 10 million. Washington DOT, out of your new discretionary money, you need to come up with 10 million. And feds, either USDA or USDOT, the states are coming up with 10 and 10. You need to come up with 10. And, that seems reasonable, seems fair, and it seems like something that at least that conversation could be had.
So I guess what I'm going to ask for, and how maybe you can help us. I'd like to see a plan of attack and get us involved of going after this 10-10-10, and we can marshal a lot of public support on both sides of the river, for this thing. To me, it just makes so much more sense to go out and issue for design and get the design done. And that puts us in a much, much better position to help attract the bigger money on the back end and the necessary bonding that we're going to need, because this is a real project. They're actually seeing it happen. So I would like, Kevin, I would like to have an action item that we put together a plan in the next couple of weeks. We're not talking months here, a couple of weeks of what do we have to do? Who do we have to see? How do we have to target, going after this 10-10-10?
So Commissioner Fox, let's, Hal's got a very creative idea there. I would certainly like to get some feedback from Dan and Brad.
They're probably throwing darts at me.
Are they still on the line?
If Dan and Brad want to go 15-15 and 10, I'm fine with that too.
Let me, Dan, Brad, I guess the question is, what are you hearing as far as how the states would be doing any type of quote unquote revenue sharing with those funds to local government? Maybe start at that level. Maybe they aren't doing that this time. Dan?
Sure. So I would say, not that they're not planning around it, the bill hasn't passed. And so they haven't necessarily been chatting a lot about how those dollars might flow. And I would say, historically, that those often land on system within the ODOT system. And then there is a process of arrangement they use through their various regional forms that those dollars flow. So I mean, in the first instance, to have dollars ready to be used mid-2022, those are probably the most flexible dollars. The dollars that we have historically pursued that are outside of the transportation are lottery dollars. Well, that bond sale for those dollars, even if we're successful in a 22 session, probably isn't until the spring of 23. And so it's the typical sources of funds that we've used are probably a slower burn than that. So these flexible federal dollars, if the bill passes and at the state level, I think it is way too premature to see, whether the magnitude of 10 is the right number with regard to what is possible. But I think we have absolutely a credible case to be made that this project stands ready to be a partner in that. And we would need the dollars based on the plan that the commissioner just laid out. In terms of how receptive, I think it's too early to tell, but we can certainly develop a plan that would give us the best shot we can at getting those dollars.
Brad, are you on the line? I thought I saw him there.
I think Brad may be on the phone trying to figure out how to
unmute.
Star six, is that it?
Might be *6, Brad. Or Jessica, if you got any.
Well, while we're trying to get Brad, I do.
Hey guys, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, it had the Zoom mute, had muted me. So getting back to the question is boiled down, is there a tool to get $15 million in the next year? Did I understand that right?
I'll even
Washington?
make it easier. We only need 10 million from you.
Yeah. Well, we put 5 million last year, which is going to deploy. As we've kind of outlined and I've kind of discussed multiple times, Washington is in an active discussion on a transportation package. That transportation package is a, several billion-dollar effort with multiple projects involved. And we are working to position ourselves within that transportation package. That the number that we have been working towards and that the Senate on the Senate side has put in is $100 million allocated for this bridge phased over a certain amount of time. There haven't been much detail beyond that. Now, that resource, if a transportation package comes, there will be sort of phasing to that money as it goes out. And if it were to pass, I think that we could probably figure out how to get some money moving quickly. The big wild card in that, and I want to make clear here, is passage of this bigger transportation package and the corresponding taxes and everything else associated with that. Now, I believe that sometime in the next 1 to 3 years, a major transportation package is going to pass, but I am not hopeful that that'll get pulled off in the next year. So
yeah, this is Mike. Let me interrupt you. I get that, and I'll tell you, we are very appreciative of Washington, going after, Washington State going after the $100 million. And in a couple of years down the road, that's fine. That's about when we're going to need it. But we're just trying to find a way of funding this design, next year, so we don't have to do this segmented approach, which is just going to drive up the cost of that design to ridiculous numbers, I'm afraid. So if there's some way that you can think about, and we lay out a plan to try and attract some of that money a little earlier, or money from someplace else a little earlier that gets paid back internal to Washington State as the bigger number comes available. What I'm really asking all three of you to do is think outside the box. And the goal that we ought to really be working for is 2 tranches of money. Tranche number 1 is about $30 to $40 million ready to go by June of next summer or thereabouts. We don't have to have all of it then, but if we had half of it, it gives us a good, strong feeling that we can go ahead and go out for bid, and we know we've got money available to run this contract and not have to stop it. So I'm really after.
Well, let me ask this. Is the port willing to look at toll revenue increase in the near term or some sort of commitment of resource, a revenue stream towards something?
I'll speak for one commissioner. And I would vote yes.
Okay.
I'm just an alternate, but I would agree.
All right.
Go ahead, Christy.
I will explore options where there are tools within the capital budget, not the transportation budget, called certificate of participation tools, which could allow some access to some streams, but there would have to be a revenue stream that gets committed associated with that to pay that back. But I'm not sure how those could work on something like that, but I will look. We have not looked in terms of those tools where revenue streams could be committed associated with something, but I'll
Yeah,
look
just-
there. That would be,
I would appreciate you doing that. And as soon as you can, get back to us and we'll hold some more discussions about this. Likewise with Oregon and the federal organization. I think timing is pretty critical. We got to kind of figure this out in the next month. We don't have 4 or 5 or 6 months. We got to get a plan together in the next month that where we need to, and I think we're going to need it, where we need to get a big groundswell of public support for this. I think we in the bi-state are ready to go do that. But we want to do it properly. And we're looking for some guidance from your 3 organizations.
I'm happy to take a look at it and consider outside the box thinking. I like that idea, actually. I do want to say that on the timing for a raise grant under USDOT, there's a current cycle underway right now, which they have not announced winners yet. We anticipate that probably by the end of October, early November. And the next raise cycle won't be until the spring of next year, which means that the grants actually won't be awarded until fall of 2022. But, having a conversation with USDA rural development folks, that's a loan, those aren't grants. And, they might be able to move on a faster timeline. So that's homework for me. I'll get back with Michael.
So-
and the rest of you.
How the USDA RD money that you described, that would, because that's a loan, that would require a revenue stream to be identified to pay that off also. So the total revenue discussion would have to be pop up again for that.
That's right. Yep.
Well, I think we should assume for right now, nothing's off the table. Bring us everything, all your crazy, weird ideas. Let's get them down on the table and work through them. Okay. Anybody else from the commission would like to raise a question or a comment?
I just have a quick comment that I put in the chat. We really need a diagram of this. We need a cash flow diagram showing what money's needed when and where it might be coming from. I know that we don't know the answers for any of this, but just I think what we just saw is a bad communication between us as a client and the consultants that we've hired to search for the money, because they were not quite on the same channel as you or Mike on what needs were when. So we really do need to diagram the cash flow.
And I think for what we're talking about here, that's really easy to do. And we'll take that action to get that done. Thanks for bringing that up. Anybody else?
Chairman Fox, I think would be interesting, they had mentioned discretionary funds in the ODOTs and WashDOTs, and we have Mike Williams on the line with us, and also RTC. Maybe it'd be nice to hear from them.
Well, I can just quickly start out and say that we're in the process right now of working through the agreement. Thank you to the senator for giving $5 million to this project, and we're working with an agreement right now with Port Hood River. So that we have more information probably after this week. Kevin could probably debrief you on that.
Mike, I've got a just a comment. All the information we've gotten on what money we might be able to get is there's just a lot of caveats. maybe this, maybe that. That's not too promising, but maybe. And I'm all for trying to get every single penny we can possibly get from all of these revenue streams, whether they be loans or whether they be grants. But with so many caveats of possibly this isn't going to work, we're not going to get this year, maybe the next year, maybe the next year. You know, we have a bridge that has a lifespan, that has a lot of money that's going to need to be spent on it for maintenance. And, you know, and there'll be drop dead dates, and that, you know, money that some of that revenue that's coming in is going to have to be used to prop up the bridge we have. So I just want to keep reminding us that, you know, we do have some drop dead dates if this money doesn't come our way. So that's all I want to say about it.
So I about the $5 million from the Washington State Legislature thing, thanks to Senator Curtis, that money is coming your way, and that and Kevin, you could probably share more about what the funds are going to be used for, but it was supposed to be given to the project to do pre-engineering work.
Right, and thank you for that. We appreciate that, and that's part of the 5 million that's going to allow us to go ahead and award this design contract. The challenge that we have, and I know you do a lot of contracting, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you told the contractor that it's a contract that gives you a price of $30 million, but you say, well, I only got 5, and trust me, we're going to have an off ramp at 5, but trust me, it'll be there. What do you think is going to happen to the $30 million estimate? It's going to go way up, because they're going to try and recover as much as they can in that first $5 million to cover the loss that they're going to take if they have to dismantle and so on. So that's why I'm really trying to make a point here. We're begging any money we can find, let's grab it, and so we can go ahead and get design done. Then we're ready to go. You know, there's no excuse other than just flat money. Let's go get it done, kind of a thing. And Kate Mayor is exactly right. That bridge has got a certain lifespan to it, and I think we all recognize that it's a lot closer to the end than it is to the front.
Well, I don't have my wallet on me right now. Sorry, it's
we accept credit cards. Give me a credit card.
You know what? If I could use my airline miles credit card, I think I could get a lot out of it.
I get you. Yeah.
So Commissioner Fox, if I might ask a question. So we've had about 15 million come into this project from federal and Oregon and Washington over the last year plus.
Right.
And you are saying that we need an additional 30 to 40 million on top of that in order to get through the design without having to do it incrementally?
Something in the neighborhood of 30 million. Again, we're trying to get this estimate done to confirm all of these numbers. But I feel pretty confident that with the 15 that we've kind of got, if we had 30, I feel pretty confident that we're not going to have a bust. And it's not to say that if we can get it done for 25, we'll take the extra 5 and kick it over onto the construction part of it. It's not going to go to waste, but to feel comfortable in awarding a contract, full-blown contract going out, I think we're talking about another 30 million, 30 to 40, I don't really know yet. But it's certainly not 5. So,
thanks. That's
okay. All. Is there any other comments from the bi-state? If not, let's move to the next topic. And we appreciate everything you guys are doing. Just do more of it quicker, please.
Well, if we can get airline miles, I tell you, we'll all be on board.
And if you need us to talk to other electeds, you know, you have that in your plan. Make sure to give us plenty of notice so we can get it on our schedule. I'm available. So just give me plenty of notice ahead of time, but I'm happy to do that.
All right, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Right now, the feds are not taking meetings, but we hope that by January, they'll start doing in-person meetings again. But even between now and then, between now and January, participating in Zoom meetings with electeds is still useful. So we'll make sure that you get enough notice that you can participate if we can get those set up.
So Hal, if we can't talk to the congressman, we're okay talking to the staffers. You know, is it staffers taking meetings?
No, nobody's taking meetings.
Okay.
So, well, you can occasionally talk a staffer into meeting you at a Starbucks off campus, but yeah, they're not taking meetings in their offices. So.
Okay, and then one last thing that I think I wanted to get this management contract in place with a communications piece of it. But I think we need to start really putting together more than what we've got, information packets that we can immediately start sharing out of the need for the bridge and what we're trying to do and so on. So I think that's something we could be working on in parallel as you guys kind of develop this strategy, and we meet again in a week or 2 weeks. Tell us how you want our help to help you, to help us. We're ready to go.
Thank you. It's great.
Okay, Kevin, back to you.
All right, let's bring the agenda up here. All right, do you see okay, there's the staff memo. So we're done with the legislative goals presentation. Let's see, going to the preliminary cost estimate update. So we are on schedule with the preliminary cost estimate. As noted, there are a number of issues that will have significant costs associated. These have been brought up at various times over the last year or two. But in talking with Commissioner Fox and Anderson, actually when Senator Merkley came and visited the bridge project, we did go over some of these items. So Commissioner Fox, I did try to include some of these maps.
Yeah, maybe we just jump in. We had a very good scoping discussion with WSP about a week ago. So the scope document itself is essentially complete. They're doing a little smoothing of the document, but we went through each of the major areas and we made a call of what goes in the estimate, what does not go into the estimate. And some of the key things that are really expensive, one is for the estimate, we're going to assume that the port offices have to get moved someplace and the port maintenance shed has to go someplace because there's going to be a working pier. And Kevin, maybe you can kind of show where that pier is going to go right out. Yeah, right through there. There needs to be a working pier on both sides of the river. And we got to have access to that working pier throughout, the construction effort. So that's one area there. There needs to be construction access to the pier and also to a ramp, if you will, for barges and whatnot. And it kind of runs right through there. So we were thinking, again, for the estimate, is that we would take over the parking lots all down through the marina. And Kevin, can you kind of highlight those areas?
Right in this area.
And then down around the corner in front of, right in through there, there's some open land. And yeah, that's a good open land through there. It's labeled X. We would put in enough money to make that into staging or lay down areas. We'd have to, after construction is over, probably repave the parking lots and whatnot. We're putting money in to relocate a ramp, a boat ramp over onto the other side of the marina so people can still get access in there. But again, that's for the estimate. On the other side of the river, we're putting money in to build a road and some staging areas coming down right now where the tribe, I believe, has some access right there. That means that we're going to have to do some negotiating with the tribes, which we're going to have to anyway. There's some other laydown areas over on the west side of Hood River, C, B, D areas. I think we said we needed, what was it, 9 acres?
I think it was something like that, 5 to 9, 5 to 10.
Yeah, so we're going to put enough money in there to find 9 acres of lease space, and then we'll have to rebuild it after we're done with it.
Mike, if I could
Yep.
just jump in for a second. So this chart was originally created by WSP as part of the NEPA process. And there was a specific reason that they did not include X and Y. So the property in X, which is the Marina Green and the Boat Basin trailer parking, was originally funded using federal grants back in as long ago as the 1970s. And so it's a fairly extensive process for converting that property. And so that's called a 6F process. So that is not included in the NEPA because so far we've been saying that there hasn't been a significant impact to the port property. That's not to say that in the future, once the NEPA document is out, that there's always reevaluations and opportunities. New things come out, better ideas. So I would just caution about that it's going to be very difficult and time consuming to convert space X. And likewise, item Y is the treaty fishing access site that's owned by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And we'll start the process of negotiating with them shortly with the Federal Highways direction. But I would say that it is a total unknown if any of that treaty fishing access site would even be eligible for staging and laydown.
Yeah, so I mean, the key thing here is that we're going to have to get close access to both sides of the bridge. You're going to need to have kind of a right of way to get down onto the port and into that working trestle area on both sides. You have to. And having a laydown area not close by makes really no sense. You're going to need that turnaround area anyway. So I think between us, we're going to have to address this in the future. For the estimate, the important thing right now is we're getting money in there to deal with this. But that's the easy part, getting it in the estimate. Now actually going and doing it, it's a whole new ball game. And Kevin's right. There's a number of things we're going to have to do to deal with that. The other thing that we decided on, go back to that for just a minute.
Sure.
Is this is right now planned to be a poured in place concrete box type of a bridge structure. So it's poured in place. It's not precast. So, and this is the trestle part of it, or the deck part of it. So do that. We're going to allow for, in the estimate, 2 dedicated batch plants, one on either side of the river. And we're going to be feeding this thing from both sides, which means, maybe area F, maybe G. We've got money in there to lease that space for a temporary batch plant. The reason why we don't want to use it, one of the commercial ones locally, there's too much concrete and the the spec is going to be such that it's going to have to be a continuous run. If we get a cold joint into that bridge, we got big problems. So that's something for the estimate we don't want to mess with. We'll take the hit and make sure there's 2 batch plants dedicated for it. Go ahead, Kevin.
Just scrolling down the treaty fishing access site, we addressed some of those issues. As you can see, there is the need for an easement over this underwater portion of the treaty fishing access site. That is going to be a process that will need to be also negotiated. We have learned that we will need to negotiate compensatory agreements with the 4 tribes before Federal Highways will sign off on the final EIS and the ROD. One of the things that we looked at is, would it make sense to make sure that include this easement in that document? Federal Highways actually thinks that it does make sense to include approval or agreement by the tribes for the easement. The easement's actually given by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but the regional or district administrator for BI certainly wants to act under, just be aware of the treaty standing on these issues as well.
So
Kevin,
this is, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it makes way more sense to try and, put every single thing on the table, whether it be staging and easements and, compensation, and try and wrap it into one package so you don't have to individually negotiate every single thing
Yeah.
every time. Yeah.
We're on the same page.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think these 2 issues for sure make sense to do that. I mean, there's about 5 different buckets, and there's so many different agreements during the NEPA process, the Section 106, in addition to the biological opinions for the impacts to habitat. But they definitely agreed that this easement issue and any compensation that goes to the tribes need to be included in a standalone agreement. And we'll keep our eyes open to see if it makes sense for anything else to be placed in there as well.
Okay.
This is another version of the access onto the Washington side. This is about the location of where that trellis would be likely placed coming off the Washington side. These colors, the red and the blue, are acquisitions, so right-of-way acquisition. There is a land use technical report as part of the final EIS that identifies those parcels. And there has been some assessor review, or was about 2 years ago, but that will certainly be a part of the right-of-way acquisition costs. One thing that's interesting is that the tribes, the Yakima, actually, they permit about every 50 feet along the shoreline fishing access to specific families. And so this is obviously going to be a very dangerous place, and that will need to be vacated during construction and removal of the current bridge.
And of course, the other thing that we got to deal with is the railroad going right through there too. And so we're going to have to be working over the top of them and get access to cross the railroad. And this one, I think we kind of talked about last time a little bit. There's the pumping station on the other side. And this proposed traffic circle is going to bump right up close to that pumping station. It's got me a little nervous. Probably means we're going to have to build a retaining wall around it to protect it. And then figure out how to give them access into that facility.
And those of you that have been tracking the project for a while, if you recall, there were 3 existing corridor options, and EC1 was farther to the west. That would have come out right across from Dock Grade Road. That one was actually dropped about, 12, 18 months ago because of constructability issues. So the point that I agree with you, Commissioner Fox, is that this is a difficult area to be building these roundabouts in. But though that is a WashDOT policy to remove all of the stoplights on State Route 14. So this is something that will need to be accommodated.
So that right there is a kind of a major project by itself. When you take a look at, we're going to have to cut into the hillside. Right now, I understand there's not a plan to have to build a retaining wall, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, keep going.
Wait,
so-
Kevin, I have one question
Yep.
about this, Commissioner Chapman. Is that something that WashDOT would financially participate in since it is a part of their goals?
Well, Michael's here, but typically if there's a private owner, you know, those costs are typically incurred by the owner. But Michael, I don't know, do you have other insight?
Typically that is, if a quote development is coming in, it's usually the costs incurred by the developer.
So
Let's not fight that fight today.
we want Michael to
Now,
keep moving.
as Kevin mentioned, this is the last signal light on the SR 14 corridor between Vancouver and I-82 on the east side of the mountains.
Okay, Kevin, keep going.
So I think that's it as far as what I had. Were there any other cost issues, Commissioner, that I thought those were the main ones that you wanted to cover?
I think those are the big ones. The other thing that we decided on in the meeting was that the precast concrete pile caps, we would actually procure probably in either Portland or Vancouver and ship them upriver via barge. We just don't have the space locally, and it probably economically doesn't make sense if you're not going to do the bridge deck itself precast to have a precast yard set up for the pile caps. So the estimate will assume that we're going to buy it to the west and ship it upriver on a barge.
So that completes what I had in the packet regarding the preliminary cost estimate.
When is our next meeting with WSP, Kevin?
Let's see, that is coming up, I believe, on I believe that might be the 20th, Wednesday, the 20th. I'll
Okay,
check
anyway,
my-
please get notice out to everybody if they would like to attend.
Absolutely. Let's see.
Well, I'd like to make a statement if I could. And I'm probably the only one that can make this statement because I'm a short timer. But I'm sure glad you can't see my picture because I'm sitting here just laughing because have fun working with the Yakimas, have fun working with the railroads. And the only thing slower than government is the railroad. So you might have just put your project out several years. But I hope everything goes well. Thank you. Oh, and would that be the park and ride lot that you would be wanting to acquisition?
They believe there is some temporary, there would be a temporary acquisition, but not permanent.
You're talking about access down to the river?
No, this is the park and ride
Yeah.
over just above the treaty fishing access site where the chamber office is in the parking lot. All right. Anything else, Commissioner Fox?
Nope.
All right, the other item on the agenda is just an update on the replacement bridge management contract. That has been completed internally and submitted to Dale Robbins at the RTC for formatting. That document has been sent to the port's outside counsel, Bill Oley at Schwab Williamson, to review. I asked for Mr. Oley to submit his memo and any changes that he might have by Wednesday, October 13th. So that would be an opportunity for the, certainly for the Port Commission to get a preview of that. But as of now, we've got a pretty tight turnaround for agency review. And not to echo what Mayor Barnes just said, but I've gotten no specific dates or times as to when we can expect to get that review back from ODOT or WashDOT. One alternative idea would be, instead of ODOT reviewing the document, that we actually get a sample of a very current procurement from ODOT that is being funded by federal highways. And so if we can get, one option would be to take that document, send that to Schwab Williamson, and then they could reconcile our document with the latest and greatest from ODOT being funded by federal highways. We did receive comment from Klickitat County based upon the use of price in the selection, and both WashDOT and federal highways prohibit the use of price.
Yeah, let me jump in there, Kevin. I was the
Sure.
big push on this one, that what I was trying to do with this RFP is kind of a two-step RFP. Goes out for bid, we get proposals back, and the price on the proposals would go to a separate organization and held. We make our evaluation of the bid and we down select a 3. On the 3, we take them into what we call an oral board review. And we take the best one and we start negotiating with them on price. But we already have their pricing table, and we have the pricing table of the other 2 bidders, as well as a fair price estimate. And we could use all 3 of those to help us gauge where the market is on the selected bidder. Apparently that's a no-no. In the commercial world, it's like, really? But I gave up. I'm done. So the way we wrote this thing is we'll down select a 3. We'll take the 3 through an oral board. We'll select the one that we think is the most qualified. And then we're going to give it to Michael to negotiate price. And he will have to get a fair price estimate going at the same time as we go out for bid. And we'll make the award on whatever deal that Michael can get. I give up. I surrender. So we'll go from there. And we're trying to have this done and awarded by early December is the timeline that we're trying to drive to. In this document, Kevin, when we get it back from Schwab and so on Wednesday, as soon as we have their comments, I think it would be helpful if we gave that out to the bi-state working group so they can kind of see where we are on this thing. I'm sure we're going to take it to the Port Commission next Tuesday, normal schedule, but I'd really like the bi-state to have a look at it as well before we do that.
Yeah, I think that the Port Commission may want to review the memo and release it at the meeting next Tuesday, since it is a memo from our port outside counsel. So that should be formally released, or at least discussed by the Port Commission first.
Why?
Well, that's normally the procurement for that came from the port to Schwabe Williamson. Typically, those are reserved.
Well, let's you and I talk about this offline. We'll get Michael on the horn tomorrow and see if we can't get this thing released at the same time. I don't see why we can't. You know, we're all working this thing together. I just don't want to take it to the port and then turn around and go back to the bi-state. It's supposed to, the way this thing's supposed to work, it goes to the bi-state, then the port, not the other way around.
Well, I think one thing too is that, you know, the port is going to be for the time being, is the owner. And so the process, there should be some conversation amongst the Port Commission as far as like the organization and of the actual project and how it ties into the management contract.
Well, we'll talk about that one afterwards. In fact, if you would like, could you give me the screen and I'll share something with the team right now?
Yeah, let's see here. Try that. You should have that green button now.
Okay, and how do I?
So if you push on that green share screen button, that should bring up the open windows on your desktop.
Hold on. Yep.
And then you just click on the frame that you want to share.
Okay. So folks, what we're talking about here is the organization chart for the RBMC organization. And the manager sits right here. Over here, we have the Hood River Port Commission and we have the Bi-State Working Group. So the way this thing is set up, you have the Hood River Port Commission, executive director, and all of the other port related responsibilities over on the left-hand side here. There's a dotted line that comes down into the RBMC from the Hood River Port Commission and a solid line from the Bi-State Working Group. So this model has been set up like DOE uses on their projects, where there's what they call a contracting officer, who in this case would be the executive director. And that person is responsible for technically administering the contract. And the way we see this going is we will have a work authorization document ideally once a year, an overriding document that says, here's everything we want this project manager and his organization to do for the year. Here's what it's going to cost. We approve it. It is administered by the executive director. As long as what we're asking that organization to do is within that scope of work, we're fine. So the in-process direction for the year comes out of the Bi-State Working Group. And again, as long as we're within scope, we're authorized to do that. So the RBMC project manager then directs these people that are in the contract, the engineer, contracts, regulatory support, communications, estimating, scheduling, construction, health and safety. And then we have two contracts that already exist. One is, frankly, Kevin with the ROD EIS, and I call special assignments. And the other one down here is legislative, Steve Siegel. Now, they would not be part of the physical work authorization, but we would still have to give them direction, and we'd work it a similar way that right now the port executive director makes sure that we're within scope, watching the money, but we're working this here to make sure that we've got a consolidated, consistent review, you know, of getting on with things. Over here, I'm going to have to move my screen here just a bit. Over here, you see the future AE contractor and the construction contractor. It's my feel that both of those contracts are administered by the HR director, but day-to-day direction comes through the project manager. Again, it's very similar to what DOE does. But now we have an organization in place that can run this whole project for us, taking day-to-day direction from the bi-state working group and contractual direction from the HR director. HR executive director. The beauty of this model is that after we stand up the new bridge authority, this thing gets cut right here and it gets moved over under this new authority, but nothing here really changes. This contract gets novated from here over to this other new entity when it's in place. That was kind of the method to my madness of kind of structuring it this way.
So,
And that's the way this RFP is actually written, that this responsibility is clearly here for making sure the contract is administered properly, but day-to-day direction is coming out of this organization here. Okay, comments?
Commissioner Fox, just one thing I just wanted to clarify. So in between the bi-state working group, in scope direction, and the RBMC project manager, do you see any port employees or staff involved in there? Or who do you see as being the
Well, right
liaison?
now, yeah, the way the document is written right now in the bi-state working group, the chair, it provides this direction into the RBMC. Me. Now, we can certainly change it as time goes on, but I think it's very important that we do that for the first year. Once we get the first year going and this thing is rocking and rolling, then there's lots of different things we could do with it. And no pride of authorship here or ownership. But I think it's important that we get it set up and really cooking in the right way.
I just want to make a comment on it. For right now, Commissioner Fox has been instrumental in helping getting this done because he has so much more experience than anyone else in the room. Thank you so much. But that being said, I think the chair and the co-chair are chairs and co-chairs, but we are a full commission. We're a working group, but we are a group that has an MOU. And I feel like Commissioner Fox has a lot more experience, absolutely. But we are a group that makes decisions together. We discuss this stuff every month. And I don't feel that, I'm fine with Commissioner Fox doing this temporarily till we get this RBMC stood up. That's fine. But I just want to say that I think we are a group. We're not just one person making the decision here.
Totally agree. So I'll give you my solemn oath here that what we do in this organization, we're going to work as a group here. And it's a group consensus of what we want this organization to do. Absolutely.
So the way I kind of see it working, Commissioner Fox, is that, if you're going to have a lot of latitude, we're going to give you and Commissioner Anderson as well as co-chairs. I kind of imagine you guys will most likely be copied both on any communication with the project manager. It's going to be up to you guys to make the decision as to whether you can make a decision on your own, or if you need to call together a meeting to make the decision. I think all of the elected officials are familiar kind of with this process and this amount of latitude that chairs have to work without calling a meeting. But I think that the mayor's point is good, is that we are a group, and that if you really need to get us together if you feel that that's necessary. I like what you've put forward here.
Yeah. So remember, I said that we would have an annual work authorization for this RBMC organization. that annual work plan, if you will be driven and agreed to by the bi-state working group as a unit. Okay. It then goes over to the Hood River Port Commission to get blessed and codified through the contract through the executive director. It gives the project manager then the contractual obligation to go ye forth. What we're doing from that point forward is making sure that it is in fact happening. And there will always be decisions of, can I slow this down a little bit to do this one? Those kinds of things will happen all the time. And between Jacob and myself, we'll probably handle 80% of them, but 20% of them will be of such magnitude. We certainly want to come back to the bi-state and make sure that you guys are okay with it. And in any event, we're going to have a set up where, at least I see it, is that project manager is going to attend our meetings and really give us an update of what's happening, what's not happening, why, and what can we do about it, kind of a thing.
So just one final thought. So this is a pretty different method that we've been using for the NEPA model. So we definitely want to share this with the Port Commission as well. So I think this has a lot of ramifications to both the port and the bi-state working group.
Anybody else in the bi-state have comments or questions? Do you want to think about it before we ask for concurrence of going forward with this? Okay, if not, I can only see a couple of you. If not, could I have a motion that we adopt this?
Commissioner Fox, do you want any comment or feedback from Schwabe Williamson first, or do you want to have some type of caveats based upon legal counsel or Port Commission review?
Sure, but before, and we're always going to have that, but I would like to, if we could, I would like to see if we've got consensus from the bi-state with this approach. Granted, if there's something illegal about it, we certainly bring it back and we'll talk about it again. I can't see that there's anything illegal what we're doing here. If so, DOE's in big trouble.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the organizational structure put forward by Commissioner Fox and vet that through the Port Commission and their legal counsel.
Could we have a second somewhere?
I'll second that.
Okay, could we have a vote? If you could, please tell your position, name, and yay, nay.
Kate McBride, Mayor, yes.
Bob Benton, Hood River County Commissioner, yes.
Commissioner Anderson, yes.
Mayor Keithler?
Mayor Barnes, aye.
And we're missing one person?
Mayor Keithler.
Sorry, I thought that someone was issuing their vote as you were speaking, Kevin. I missed it.
Mayor Barnes voted aye.
Oh, sorry. I just didn't know if we missed her. Marla Keithler, Mayor, White Salmon, aye.
Okay, and Mike Fox, obviously, aye. Okay. Let's go back to the agenda. Kevin?
Okay, let me get that up here. All right, so one item that was on the agenda at the last meeting was the port feedback survey. Staff hasn't really been in the loop on that. So Commissioner Fox, if you wanted to
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of change hearings here a little bit. Each of the bi-state working group members, if you remember a couple of weeks back, I sent you a proposal about this. This is the feedback mechanism to the port, specifically to the executive director as far as performance review in support of the bi-state working group. Do you all remember that? Could we have a quick discussion? How do you feel about adopting something like that? Is it worthwhile or not? And I'm fine either way.
I don't have it in front of me. I remember filling it out. But I think some of the things, I'm just thinking about directors, the managers for the city, and giving direction to them for specific things and sort of specific things that we've tried to accomplish and are working on. And I think that there's trying to get to a point, and then I think there's trying to get to a point, and there's a lot of things out of your control. I think that there's some of the things that were in that seemed a little bit unrealistic. And some other things that seem, well, we need to be plugging ahead here faster than we are. So I don't want to just adopt something like that whole cloth, because I feel that there were some things that probably would need to be tweaked at least.
Kevin, can you stop sharing and I'll share the document with them?
Sure.
Okay, let me share. I think it's that one. Okay, so what we're talking about here, folks, is I sent you this a couple of weeks ago, and there is 2 feedback items that I proposed. One is item 1. All activities needed to support an expedited bridge replacement are well and aggressively supported. The goal for this fiscal year is follows: get the replacement bridge management contract in place. Comprehensive bid package had been developed and ready to be issued for the design effort. This is through June of 2022. Funding of at least 40 million has been successfully committed to the port, which will fully or partially fund the replacement bridge design effort. The port executive director has been aggressively supporter of efforts necessary to get this. Comprehensive bid package has been developed and ready to be issued for a plan B should we have to go PPP. So as we award the management contract, the first thing I think we want them to get going on is the design contract package. That's priority number 1. In here, I've got kind of a priority number 2, but it's a close one, is getting us ready to go should we have to do a PPP. If we waited on this until, the next cycle, it's not going to hurt anything. If we don't want to do that, and we can take that out real easy. It is expected that the port administrator will implement actions sourced through the bi-state working group as approved by the Port Commission in an expeditious manner. Okay, so this $40 million is a big ask, and it's not totally in his control. The meaning here is that, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we could in fact get 40 million in support of this? And the executive director was a big part of helping us figure out how to get this done. Now, to get a 5 rating, there's a rating of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 means that we did it. Okay, and that's kind of like flying through the air, walking on water type of effort. If we could get 30 million, I'd be really ecstatic. But I know there's some concern that's been expressed about putting a $40 million, goal out here. Anyway, that's the first one. The second one is recognize and actively support the existence and directions provided by the Bi-State Working Group and its leadership. The goal of the Bi-State is to expedite construction of the Hood River Replacement Bridge. The Bi-State Working Group is considered the precursor to the new governing body, Bi-State Bridge Authority, of which legislative language is being prepared. The leadership of the Bi-State Working Group will have the technical direction responsibility of all new bridge replacement activities. The Port Executive Director will administer all contract changes as well as pay approved invoices. So this last couple of sentences talks a little bit about the organization chart we just went through with the kind of the DOE approach, a contracting officer versus a technical representative. So this one is basically how well is the port really supporting us getting on with things? And the first one is more about some very specifics, getting the contract in place for the management contract, getting a bid package ready to go for design, attracting a bunch of money for design, getting a bid package developed and ready or nearly ready for a PPP if we have to do that. That's the two that I've got here.
I think
go ahead.
Just to give some feedback on this, I guess I have a hesitation on this because I feel like it's a little bit of the Bi-State Working Group getting out of their lane. I think that, we have two representatives in this group from the Port Commission, and I just worry that it's graying the areas of direct report, and regardless of whatever this evaluation is, it doesn't really play into the true review or performance that matters in the administration over at the port. And so I guess how I would view this, and I think that what's being brought forward are great items to focus this group at those key moments of a year to evaluate how we're progressing. But I kind of see that as then feedback from this group being relayed to our commissioners at the port to then share with the Port Commission. That really some of this is getting into a jurisdiction that's really the Port Commissioners. And maybe that's a little bit what Mayor McBride was saying, which I'm not putting words in her mouth, but having a city staff, I think that if this was something being proposed in a working group outside that then was determining the review of one of my staff members, it just gives me pause, I think.
Yeah. After I did this, well, anybody else have comments before I jump back in?
Yes, I agree with Marla. In a sense, I don't think anything like this should be in place until we truly have changed the legislature and we are a bi-state port authority. Other than that, that would be absolutely like me having you come over and asking you to help me evaluate my employees, and that's never going to happen. So I would have to agree on that point.
Okay, so after I did this and I got some preliminary feedback from some of you and I reflected on it, I don't disagree. So what I did, Michael and I have already sat down on this, and I took it on myself that says, Michael, here's what's important to me as one of the commissioners. And I actually added a third one that doesn't deal with the Bi-State Working Group. It deals with something else that's going on with the port. So Michael and I have already had this discussion, and this is the way I'm going to judge Michael's performance. How the rest of the commissioners at the port deal with it, we're trying to get that all worked out. But I'm being upfront with Michael. This is what I expect from this commissioner to you, and I want you to succeed here's what my definition of success is for you. So I've already done that. But what I would like to do is before I sit down with him twice a year, I would like to spend a few minutes with you guys, maybe individually, and get your perceptions of how you see things are working. If we're getting all the support we need, super. If we're not, let me know from your view, and I can use this to help provide feedback into Michael. That's what I would propose.
I see no problem with that. I don't mind having a conversation that helps you maybe see things when you're doing your review that maybe you haven't noticed.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take this off the table, and we'll just do it very unofficially in the future when it's time to provide some feedback. Okay.
Commissioner Fox, can I just make one quick comment if I could? I just want to remind the members of the Bi-State Working Group that this is an advisory board to the Port of Hood River Commission. And as such, it does meet all public meeting rules as far as record retention and public meeting records and rules. So, let's just keep that in mind as we move forward, that any discussions that are leading to a decision or recommendation of the Bi-State Working Group should be done in open session, unless you want to go into some other style. But I just want to be very, very, give you some caution.
Good counsel there, Kevin. I appreciate that. Okay, let's move to the next item.
Okay, I had sent back, I think after the last meeting, a copy of the minutes. And so I don't know if you had reviewed those. I sent those out it's probably been about 2 or 3 weeks. Were members of the working group able to review those?
I looked at them and I thought they were fine, but I don't know what the date was on those. I can make a motion for the approval, but what was the date of that meeting?
Those were the August 9th Bi-State Working Group meeting minutes.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the August 9th meeting minutes for the Bi-State Working Group.
Second.
Is that Jake? Is that you?
Yeah, Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Good job, Kevin.
Okay, thank you. And then just other items, I don't necessarily want to read what's in the staff report, but we did have a meeting. The biggest one worth bringing to your attention is that Federal Highways determined that compensatory agreements are going to be required with the 4 treaty tribes before they will sign up on the final EIS and ROD. I did meet with Federal Highways late last week. I touched on it earlier in the meeting regarding the BIA land, but we are in the process of working with ODOT to develop a budget for pursuing that. One of the things that I'm doing right now is obtaining fish landing reports, or trying to. I've got calls into ODFW and CritFic to start developing data that could be beneficial for that discussion. So we're in the process of starting those agreements. We're looking to not use WSP since we're so close to the end of our budget authority with them. One other good news that we had a conversation with ODOT today, and the ARPA funds that I had identified to the working group as being available next year, second quarter, they are allowing for reimbursement in advance of payment or in advance of the contract being approved. So what that means is even though that grant agreement wouldn't be approved until spring of next year, we could start reimbursing, getting reimbursed from those funds in advance, which will take some of the pressure on the cash flow as we finish up NEPA and transition to the next phase. So lots happening, wanting to keep the project moving forward, but the bottom line is that's going to keep the final EIS and the ROD, that could actually end up going out as much as second quarter or third quarter of next year as we're waiting for this compensatory agreement. There's nothing that's going to keep the other elements being done. And I talked to WSP this morning that as they continue their final work, that there will likely be some pauses or some quiet time in the contract while their work is done and Federal Highways and ODOT complete the work on the compensatory agreements.
So Kevin, good news on the funding on the EIS issue and the ROD. It's really disheartening to hear this at this late stage of the game that the rules kind of get changed on us. It's my understanding that's not going to hold us up from moving along, but it's something that we've got to address. And I would suggest, Commissioner Anderson, that you and I and Kevin, when Kevin's ready to sit down, get a little better feel for what is the negotiating strategy, time frame for doing so, and who he sees should be involved in this. If you'd be okay with having that kind of a discussion, Jacob.
I'm fine with having that discussion. I was with the compensatory agreements. So the agreement needs to be in place, but it doesn't need to be paid until we actually start construction, correct, Kevin?
That's exactly correct. The Federal Highways, they want those agreements signed in advance of the final EIS ROD to avoid any potential lawsuits from the tribes about the final EIS or ROD.
Yeah, my concern when I heard this was how is it going to impact our ability to attract federal funds? And I was told it should not, as long as we've got a plan and we're working that plan.
I would agree with that, Commissioner. I think that there's nothing that's going to limit the federal funding that we've currently got in hand. So we're making good progress forward. As far as a funding perspective, I think this is pretty typical of these types of processes with projects of this size.
So would this be this compensation agreement? Would this be done separately? I know it has to be done. It's one of the first things that should be done so we can get the EIS and the ROD finished.
Yeah.
But are we going to add in these other easements and other things that need to be talked about now? Are we going to put, add that into the pot now or what?
Yes,
And
federal.
I was just going to say, just be extremely patient. The negotiations with the tribes, sometimes, 2 steps forward, 1 back, and that's just how it works.
Yes, Mayor, I agree. We've been dealing with that with COVID and the way the tribal agencies and frankly, all agencies have been dealing with the pandemic. But yes, Federal Highways is looking at those easement issues and have agreed that those should be included in the compensatory agreements as well. So Commissioner Fox, if there's, that's all I have as far as other updates. If there's not any other questions or comments, our next meeting is scheduled for November 8th.
I've got one last one, and it's kind of aimed at Marla, but everybody else as well. I'll make sure that organization chart that we talked about gets out to everybody this afternoon. One of the things, Marla, if you would be interested in doing is thinking about, especially on the communication piece of this thing. You and I've talked in the past that you see that that whole area is going to have to get expanded and make it really robust. And what we heard from the funding folks earlier, it seems to me the whole public outreach, communication, all of that's going to have to get stepped up several notches. As soon as they hit the ground, we got to be rolling. So one of the things, if you could think about, you know, we talked about this first year work plan, work authorization, and it's really 6 months. It's from award through June. What would you have that communication person doing? And we need to be thinking about that now and getting it into a work plan before we issue this thing for bid, because that will be part of the negotiation on the cost side of it. So I propose next meeting, we're going to bring forward a draft high-level document that says, here's what we think that contractor needs to be doing in the first 6 months of the contract. And we get everybody's input to it, and I'll send it out beforehand so you can all be kind of churning through it. But Marla, I see with your expertise and your background, you know so much more about this than I do or others. We need to take advantage of that, I think.
Well, thank you. I don't want, that's a tough torch to carry, but I will take a first pass at a draft. And then I think that at least gives the whole group something to expand upon or at least give feedback on. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else have any comments before we close?
Yeah, my only, I guess, question / comment is I'm really unsure as to what we are, I guess, after Kevin's comments to us, and that we are bound by public meeting law, which I wasn't aware of up until right now. So I'd like to have the, I haven't had any meetings that would be out of order with that away from the group, but I need to understand what we are, because it's, I'm not clear on that. We've also started voting and having formal motions. And so I think we all need to be on the same page as exactly what we are and what we're bound by, because we have advisory committees at the county that aren't necessarily bound by public meeting law. So I'm not clear on that. And I really want to understand that moving forward so that we don't make any missteps.
Yeah, I'm going to need some guidance. Maybe Commissioner Anderson, you can certainly help out with that, and Kate and others. I was hoping we could kind of keep this as a working group, but to make sure that we're getting everybody's voice in trying to decide things. I wasn't trying to make it totally official. Maybe we have to do that.
Mike, my understanding is that, and I'm sure that Kevin can check with attorneys on this, but my understanding is that there are two types of advisory committees. One which is advisory to an elected body, which does have to follow public meeting law, and one which would be advisory to the director, which does not follow the public meeting law. And I thought that we were technically advisory to Michael McElway as opposed to the Port of Hood River, which made us not follow public meeting law as long as each of our own bodies doesn't have a quorum of commissioners present. So that's kind of what I thought we were doing. And it sounds like, I might be wrong on the law, first of all. So if someone could double check on that. And then secondly, what is it that we intended to do?
Yeah.
I always thought that, that regardless of that, even if that was what we were doing, that we were not, this is not an executive session, and we are elected officials, even if it is a working group, and that anyone that wanted to, if we were meeting in person and we were meeting down at the port offices, an audience could show up there to watch our business being done. So regardless of whether we made a motion or did it officially, that public meeting laws would dictate that, you know, unless we're having a specific executive session about something, that it was open to the public to watch at least.
Yeah, I see. I don't think, Kate, I don't think that that's the way it works. Under Oregon law, at least, there's two different kinds of advisory committees. And I thought we fit into the one that did not require it to be open meetings and did not require us to deal with the quorum issues and that sort of thing. But again, you know, first of all, that's Oregon law, and I am not a lawyer, so I may have gotten that wrong.
What I can do is get a more formal memo addressing that issue.
Like maybe talk to a real lawyer.
Right.
Yeah, we'll do that. The way I see this organization, we're providing suggestions back to the port commissioners who consider our input in making decisions. The kind of the gentleman's agreement that we've got with the other port commissioners is that we have two commissioners on this board right now. And we take that back to the board. And if we see that the bi-state working group has a consensus of direction, that is strongly, strongly considered by the port in making their decision. And again, this is kind of I see this as a testing ground, training ground for the new bi-state bridge authority that eventually gets put in place.
This is Commissioner Anderson. I don't know how things work in Oregon, but in Washington, if you have a board that's 5 members or 6 members or more, then Mike and I can have a conversation one-on-one, and that's not an Open Public Meetings Act issue. If you're like a county commission and there's 3 members, I can't even talk to my seatmates about anything with business if it's not an open meeting. I'm not worried about this because this is being recorded. It's going to be posted. We should post on the website so that it is open to the public, so that if they want to listen into these, they can. If it is a full public meeting, then I think the public comment period would be wise. But other than that, I don't see anything really that I have to worry about too much.
Thank you.
I think Betty was trying to say something.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, same thing as Jacob. I mean, as long as we don't have like, 3 council members together, we're not a quorum. And the same would be true. And I've said on a lot of commissions that we take votes. They may be at advisory votes, but we still have to take those votes. You know, how do you advise without taking a vote of the people together? But Kevin, we do, you do put this on YouTube, do you not?
Yes, that's correct.
And it's recorded?
That's correct. It's archived on the Port Hood River YouTube channel.
So anybody from the public can go and listen to this meeting, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Just my thoughts.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to run this like a public meeting. We'll make sure that we've got a quorum. We're not meeting outside of this if it's more than 2 people. It's very similar to what we do with the port right now.
Yeah, I think we just need a report back from Kevin that outlines that. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know the exact number of members. I mean, if we're going to formalize this a little bit more, we've all got exposure to the Ethics Commission. If what Kevin is saying is true, based on how we advertise the meetings, hold the meetings, make decisions, there's a whole bunch of potential exposure if what Kevin said is true, and I wasn't aware of that. And so if that's the case, we really need to be smart about what we're doing and formalize things more. If we are more informal and what he said is perhaps not correct, then I think we're fine to continue forward. But without really understanding what we are and what laws apply, I'm a little hesitant. That's all. So I think Kevin can get that info back by the next meeting and we can figure out what we need to do.
Never hurts to check with your lawyer.
Not a problem. I'll probably get something with you.
And I was in this, this is Commissioner Chapman, and I was under the impression that it was not necessarily under public rule, and that we were consensus, but not necessarily motions.
Commissioner Chapman, you really broke up. Maybe somebody else heard it. I didn't.
I think she was saying that it was consensus based. I heard her mention consensus.
Well, Kevin, let's meet with the lawyer and try and get some clarification here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me go ahead and do that. So if I get some findings in advance of the next meeting, I'll distribute those earlier along with the minutes.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Well, thank you so much for your time. And we'll be talking to you shortly. And we'll email you some of this information today. Thank you.
Bye-bye.